Hello, everybody. I'm Steven,
And I'm Beth.
and we are Vino, or wineip.org. We're going through a little bit of a transitional phase here, I guess, of not knowing.
We're both.
We're both, all of the above.
You can be more than one thing.
Oh, right. So today we're doing a virtual vacation to Willamette Valley, Oregon, and we're going to be talking about Pinot Noir. Now, fun fact, Beth and I went to Willamette back in 2019 in August. And the whole thought was that we'd take some pictures during that time. And at that exact point in time, we were doing in-person events at our place of work. And the thought was that we would just allow the pictures to guide the conversation. And that's what we're going to do today. So it's kind of fun, and it's going to be like, what would it look like to take a trip to Willamette Valley?
Yeah, so if you had not heard it said out loud before, before going to Willamette, I wasn't sure if it was Willamette or Willamette. It's Willamette. And this is a region in Oregon that is making some beautiful Pinot Noir wines. It is a destination. It's a fun place to visit. It's a fun place to shop for wine. And it is increasingly popular among French winemakers in purchasing land and trying to cultivate out there.
And as we can see in this picture, they also have a lot of hazelnuts, which is really interesting as well. So like there's this dynamic of if the conditions aren't really perfect for wine growing, they grow hazelnuts. It's a really beautiful place to go. I kind of did a little bit of math. Recently, one of us had a birthday, and not that it was her 40th birthday. It was not. But this is our 40th event.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we've done 25 virtual events, and we previously had done around 15 in-person events. So this is our 40th event. And so we're coming full circle. We're bringing it back to Willamette. And
it's the first place we went together. Should I tell the story?
Tell the story before we get in it.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, so Steven and I were beginning our wine adventure together, and we thought we'd plan a trip to wine country. We thought the United States, let's stick with the U.S. since it's a little simpler. I think at the time I may not even had a current passport. And so I suggested Willamette Valley, Oregon, because I really enjoy Pinot Noir wines. I think that they can express themselves differently in lots of different regions. Popular in the United States, in California, in the cool climate California and Oregon, but I personally like the Oregon. So I said, why don't we go? And Steven said yes. And just about a day before we left, he turned to me and he said, I don't really like Pinot Noir. And this is by far the grape that is most famous in this region. And I said maybe that would have been something you could have shared with me earlier. But as it turns out, Steven does like Pinot Noir. He had just not had anything quite this good yet.
And I think that really does, say a lot about how you can grow as somebody who appreciates wine. I mean, I even said back in 2019, I don't really like Pinot Noir. And really it was just that my experience had been that $12 to $15 price point, hot, very luscious like grounds in California. Warm climate. Oregon is a cool climate region, and
it happens to be at the
completely different expressions of Pinot Noir.
Oh yeah. I mean, Pinot Noir is a main component in Champagne. Steven.
That's right. I know.
I
didn't even know at the time.
So it turns out that this region in the United States is at the same parallel as Burgundy.
Right, which is we're going to come in to talk about like clone varietals in a little bit, but like it is America's Burgundy, which is really wonderful.
And many Burgundy producers have put houses out here to take advantage of that and kind of hedge their bets in case of climate change in France, changing too rapidly for them.
Yeah. Well, since we're taking a virtual vacation, I think when we, sometimes it can be intimidating when you don't know a region that well, all the way to the logistics of getting from the airport, right? And there's a wonderful train system from the airport to downtown. And once you get off the train, within minutes, you can find some of these beautiful pop-up, bazaars and shops that are around.
Portland's definitely a foodie town.
It's a foodie town. It's a crafty town. It's a musical town. we don't just drink wine, right? This place has tons of breweries. Rogue is out there. And then it's a foodie town. They have tons of food trucks. I thought it was really interesting. Do you remember the story about the food trucks and how they go? Okay, so the food trucks will like go into like an abandoned lot and just set up shop, and there will be like 6 food trucks with absolutely like wonderful food. And then a bunch of people come in and they keep going to the food trucks, and the food trucks are allowed to just stay there. They set up tables and lights, and crime decreases around those food trucks because there's higher, population circulating through. Bars across the streets will start popping up. You really just have this like organic growth from this surge of money coming to a specific area, purchasing food, purchasing drinks, wanting to hang out, and then we start having more commerce that pops up. And it's a really interesting way to see how areas of Portland kind of become commercialized based on food trucks.
I just really want one of those, Bao, again. Yeah,
they were fantastic. We couldn't eat enough of them. We tried, but yeah, so it's a beautiful place to explore, and then it's just minutes away from, I think it's about a 30-minute drive until you're in the wine country.
So Willamette Valley AVA, remember we've talked about AVAs before, so this is American Viticulture Area. This is kind of the equivalent of the DOCs over in Europe or AOPs. However, American viticulture areas sometimes are a bit larger and more encompass a lot more regions. They're not as finely broken up pretty frequently. But in Willamette Valley, they actually took the time to break this region up more fine. And you can see labeled here McMinnville, Eola Amity Hills, Dundee Hills, Chehalem Mountain, Ribbon Ridge, and Yamhill Carlton District. And these each take on their own character, and there's lots of great wineries to explore in each. So this whole wine region is just south of Portland.
Just south of Portland.
And so we rented a car and just drove on down there.
That's right. It's only 10,000 acres in all of the Willamette Valley AVA. And then each one of these sub-AVAs is anywhere between 1,700 acres and 600 acres, being like the smallest, which is incredibly small. And so what happened with this story is in this area is that here, we'll flip through the pictures. So we're on our this was like one of the spots that we saw. They had this beautiful poster, and around the 70s, the winemakers that were in the region kind of had a self-imposed tax where they collected a portion of their proceeds and put it into this huge study to, once the AVA is declared, then they could make grounds for having the farmland secured. And
so they looked at the soil and geology, geography, and really mapped all this out in great detail.
So when we look at like the drive through Willamette Valley, you don't see, huge towns on top of these, mountains overlooking the waterways and such like that. There really isn't this overproduced commercialization because it's all deemed by farmland based off of this study that then went on to, also to make it declared an AVA.
So Dundee and McMinnville are kind of the towns, but yeah, they're
Correct.
definitely on
Correct.
the small side.
They're definitely on the small side of things. And then once they have the larger AVAs, they've really then became, again, as Beth said, we have a lot of French influence. And so they really wanted to say, where is the terroir? Where is like the specificity of flavor coming from? And we're going to talk about soil in a little bit, but they have guides that talk about how certain regions, such as, this one specifically, I'm looking at, this one is like plum and currant and 5 spice. So if you taste this Enola Amity versus McMinnville has like plum and pine, right? And so even though it's the same grape and they're only like less than a couple of miles away from each other, they express completely different. It's a really unique time. Just more kind of cool pictures. It was a great little exhibit that they put in there. They really cared about the geology here. And that's one of the factors that is important to know about when you go out to Willamette, is that they care about the geology, and they believe that that strongly influences the terroir of the juice that you get to drink. So
I hope you're enjoying the bottle right now. This has definitely got a lot of the characteristic flavor and structure profiles of a Willamette Valley Pinot Noir. it's taking me back.
Yeah, right. And with these, it also does need, having a little bit of air on them, especially when they're young. From the very first sip until now, as I just took it, it's really starting to evolve quite a bit more, open up more.
Yeah. Beautiful views.
Yeah, we love maps, but we also just love beautiful vistas. And as we said, there's not this overproduced hilltop towns and skyscrapers throughout the Willamette Valley. And it's just absolutely gorgeous. Here what we see is we actually have different arrangements of the plots in order to capture different sunlight and the soil as it falls off the hills, right? So, why did they pick the orientation to change? And it's very plot specific. And out there, they'll change the orientation of how the grapevines grow. They'll change the specific clone type, and then also the canopy management is also a big issue out there because canopy can help protect against the sun. It helps collect in nutrients, but then it also allows for the energy of the plant to go to the leaves versus the grapes, and so it's all just a balance out there. It's one giant science experiment, really. They're trying to catch up to Burgundy, in my opinion. That's the sense I got out of it.
We got to go into some great wineries. One of them had a gravity-based system for moving the wine through the winery, and they had some of their own cellars, and so here's some pictures from the cellars.
And that gravity-based, I forgot about that. That's a really great memory. The gravity-based means that you don't have to use pumps then, right? So you have...
gentler on the wine.
Yeah, you have you crush at the top, and then that feeds right into your fermentation tanks, and your fermentation tanks feed into your barrel rooms. And then when you don't have those pumps, you're not going to be breaking up those phenolic compounds in the wine as it moves through. It's very, very interesting out there.
Yeah. Really beautiful, sort of, as Steven mentioned, there's some development, but it's predominantly sort of rural. And it was just fun to see the different vistas. Very beautiful views everywhere.
This specific vineyard was Bergstrom, and that just really took our breath away. It was beautiful wine, beautiful views, amazing people out there.
Very professional tasting.
Very professional tasting.
We chatted before our tasting with the person who led us through, and they were going through a lot of the testing, and studying of wine. So they were well versed in the entire world of wine, not just Willamette Valley. And I think that context really helps. A lot of people out there know a lot about wine. A
lot of people, and I thought it was really interesting too, because when we were out there, we had selected a bunch of wines. Again, we took the pictures. We also brought back wines that we were going to share with the in-person tasting group that we were doing at the time, but then we had to all go home and we couldn't do that event, and that was quite some time ago. But I thought it was really interesting because when we were out there, we were talking about what we were doing, why we were picking up wine, and I remember one of the people who had just studied for their WSET 3 thought it was really interesting. They're like, wait, you already have a group of people that listen to you talk about wine, and they really get into what you talk about. And I thought that was a really interesting time because we felt that we had a great community with us, that we were out there for a purpose to not only see beautiful areas and drink wonderful wine, but we had a secondary purpose, and that was to try to find this experience and bring it back to everybody.
Yeah, so finally we're able to.
Yeah, finally. With the grapes out there, we have to talk about clones.
Everyone really gets into clones in Willamette Valley. They'll tell you, this is clone 7.7 or this is clone that. So these are variations among the Pinot Noir grape that they've found work really well with their specific site, and they're going to express a little bit differently. And the goal is always to find, the right clone for your vineyard so you can make the most spectacular wine. That's
right. And originally there was no rhyme or reason to what the clones, the grape varietals were that were originally planted in Willamette. A lot of them were suitcase wines, right? Suitcase grapes, where they throw them in their suitcase from Burgundy and just plant them and hope for the best. And but Phylloxera knocked that out, and this region kind of hurt after Phylloxera, hit it. And then if you were to read the history, it says, Dijon, there was a prominent wine producer that helped out this region by sending over specialized clones that they thought would do really well. And then all those different numbers are different, a lot of them are different variations of that Dijon clone. And Dijon is a region in Burgundy, right? So
Also famous for its mustard.
also famous for its mustard. That's right. Oh, it's amazing mustard. If you go over to that region, you got to get the wine and the mustard. Those are the two things. But of course, when we talk about grapes, it's better to talk about it in pretty pictures. So this is what it looks like. We have just grapes that are struggling, right? We don't have a ton of vegetation here. They're not spraying heavy chemicals out here. That's just the, kind of the aridness.
It's a little rugged, yeah.
It's cool climate, high diurnals. We also see this selective pruning that we kind of talked about, right? There's not a lot of grapes down at the bottom. But we also don't see berry clusters inside of the canopy, right? This makes it easier to harvest the wine. Everything is most prestigious places are harvesting by hand, especially in our sub-AVAs. And it just makes it easier. Let's get a zoom in on those. Yeah.
Aren't they pretty?
When we went out there, it was right during veraison, so you get to see how quickly they become that beautiful, reddish purple color.
Yeah, and so this grape can be pretty finicky, but so prized that people are willing to put up with its somewhat delicate nature.
Yeah, and the delicateness comes from the skin thickness, and then also how tight the clusters are. Right, we can see that this is a fairly tight clustering of grapes, which can be pretty prone to mildew. And so it's if you have more space, air can blow through it. Mm-hmm. But there's the diurnal effects, which are the large temperature swings between day and night. That's right. We have to mention the Van Duzer corridor if we're talking about Willamette Valley. Yeah. We don't have a picture of it, but everybody talks about how the Van Duzer corridor.
That's right.
So we have the cold winds coming off the Pacific, but there's a mountain chain. It's a Willamette Valley, right? So there's a mountain chain on both sides of it, and it kind of creates, again, that great valley, that beautiful, lush valley in between the two mountain ridges. And on the left side, you really have these cold influences coming in from the Pacific. Well, there's the Van Duzer corridor. And what that Van Duzer corridor does is allow some of that Pacific wind to rip through. And the areas that are right around that have different microclimates because of the Pacific winds. They're so cold up there.
Yes, we're not directly by the coast, but you're still definitely impacted by that Pacific influence.
That's right. And so when we talk about the Pacific influence, just for scale again, right, we can talk about how Pinot Noir also grows down in Santa Barbara, California, down in the south of California, because that valley where Santa Barbara is actually aligns so that way the Pacific winds rip straight through. There's nothing that stop them, and they're so cold that we have cold climate in Southern California.
Even all the way down in Santa Barbara. So that's another place that's always been on our list. They also grow Pinot Noir.
That's right. Now that I know that I like Pinot Noir because of this trip.
Now, we, I don't know, are you going to share any pictures about the sparkling?
We're not, no.
Okay. So, as I mentioned, Pinot Noir is a major grape in Champagne. This is not lost on the people in Willamette Valley. And there's also a lot of people making really high quality and expensive sparkling wine out there. So that's another thing to look out for.
I think it's also really interesting to note that people really care about, again, that science and how is this region going to evolve over time. And there's certain producers like Argyle that libraries and catalogs a lot of their sparkling wines. So that way they can see how does their specific representation of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir evolve over time in bottle. Yeah,
we're talking mostly about Pinot Noir tonight, but they grow some great Chardonnay too. So keep an eye out for that as well.
And what a wonderful slide to go into. So they also grow Chardonnay, Pinot Gris, some Riesling. I really appreciated their Gamay when I was out there.
Yeah, I mean, Gamay has a lot of similarities with Pinot Noir. It's no surprise that it would show well there.
And I think it's something, too, where somebody's going to bottle Gamay when it's really amazing, right? Because if you're going to have a tasting and you're going to have the Gamay next to this Pinot Noir, you want it to live up to it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the Pinot Gris was interesting. I really liked what they were doing. When we went there with the Chardonnay, they were really trying to find that balance between oak aging. So it had a little bit of those toasted notes. Sometimes it's called that butter or that, triple cream brie tasting notes in the Chardonnay. And they were having just a slight bit of it, but still maintaining that crisp, cool climate Chardonnay
Yeah, I think they're really going for a Burgundian style.
Burgundian style, definitely.
Not overdoing it on the oak, but a little bit of it.
Yeah. And then, of course, Riesling we know is a very cold climate grape, and because that we know that some of the regions in Willamette Valley
can get pretty cold.
You get higher in elevation, closer to the Van Duzer corridor. There's a test later.
They have great names out there.
They really do. Chehalem Mountains.
Dundee Hills.
So this is the legend from that map that we showed at the very beginning. I know it's a little blurry, but I had set a mission forth long ago that I was going to use the pictures that I took, and I didn't quite have the camera that I have today. But anyways, this is what we're going to use. And so this really showcases on the right column the different types of soils that they are tracking in that AVA. Mm-hmm. And, we have volcanic soils, we have maritime soils. What I think is really interesting about the different colorations that we see here are the time zones, right? So our very top is that alluvium soils, and that's really from like now until about 15,000 years ago. And then it goes, from all the way back to our very bottom. We're talking about 25 to 50 million years ago. That's maritime soil sediment that exists so close to the surface that it influences the grape characteristics. And I think that's something that's kind of awe-inspiring, is that the earth has been around for a long time, and so when we drink grapes, they're extracting some of that mineral characteristics when we talk about terroir from soils that have been around for 50 million years.
Wow.
That's a lot of time.
We were also burning fuel that was made a long time ago where we were driving around.
That's right. Yeah, I guess that's true. They really try to make a cool representation of these aspects. They showcase.
Yeah, everywhere we went, there was like dirt and rocks, and they were like, "Look at this cool seashell that we found." They were into it.
They were great. Really into it, and so yeah, this one of the places that we stopped, they showcased this specific Dundee site had 15 million year old soil, and they took a soil core sample and showcased it here. Right, we can see the different porosities that exist. Again, 15 million years, so we can see the different, even though it's a different site, still has very similar porosities in the soil. And then this one that is 45 million years old, right? What does that look like in comparison? And what I think is interesting was that we got to taste the wine and had recognizable differences between these sites that are not so far apart. We're talking plot by plot.
And this is where the winemaker intentionally tried to keep the winemaking the same, so that you could indeed experience the differences of terroir.
And they're still trying to make a palatable wine. So they're still using some oak, but the oak barrels are pulled from the same source. The charring is the same. The level of any type of manipulation is the same between the three different grape bottlings. So that way we can really try to discern by our palate that essence of terroir.
Yeah.
There's a great study. We can send it out to the group that Katena Zapata sent out. And the big takeaway is that terroir exists, but not all places have terroir. So,
meaning some places, if you plant the grapes in two plots next to each other, you'll taste differences. In other places, you won't taste any difference. So terroir is measurable. It can be there, but it's not necessarily there. So Willamette Valley is special because it is a place where terroir is really there.
Yeah, and I'm just getting more and more excited by this bottle because as it's evolving, like I thought the nose was beautiful. But even that's opening up more. But it's really that palate that's really kind of coming through now. It's really zippy and pulling me in more and more.
It's yummy.
It's very yummy. And this is what Beth just mentioned, right? Rocks. And so Youngberg Cellars was one of the places that we stopped off at. And
we actually stayed at their guest house. So a lot of these wineries will have guest houses as well, and you can stay overnight there, like kind of B&B style. And we did our tasting the morning before we left.
That's right. And we did spit.
Yeah, so when you're doing a big journey like this, in order to experience the wine and, continue on your journey, You can hire a driver. That's totally an option. But you can also spit the wine and then keep going. So, this was actually, I remember this is one of our first big experiences doing that professionally. And, it's still weird to me the first few times you do it in front of another wine professional and they don't think it's strange. You're like, I'm spitting my wine out in front of you. And they're like, nope, that's totally normal. So It's completely acceptable if you want to taste a lot of wines, and encouraged really if you're, driving.
Yeah.
So.
Also, like, the wine buckets will have lids on them, and the lids have a vented opening. And so you can spit into a cup and then pour.
I prefer that method personally.
It's a lot cleaner.
I bring my own cup and I spit into that and I pour. Especially post-COVID. This was pre-COVID, but post-COVID, that's, I think, more acceptable. But,
right.
There are some people that would bring individual spittoons for you that were fresh. So then you can just use those.
But yeah, if there is a spittoon and it has that top, that top is really so that way the inside doesn't get super gunky for the people that are working. It is not, you're supposed to remove that before you try to spit. Otherwise, you really just create like a ramp of the spit. So take the top off.
Okay.
Anyways, too much information. Anyways, you learn sometimes the hard way while you're out there, and you learn fast. And like we said, this was our first major wine trip, and we had a great experience out there.
Yeah,
Learned
but
a lot
also when
on the
you're
fly.
drinking wine at 10:30 in the morning, you're not really interested in drinking it. You just want to taste it, so you spit.
Some of them you really feel bad about because they're just so delicious.
Some of them are so good. Yeah, it's like a shame. But we purchased some of those and took them home.
So tonight we're talking about Christom Vineyards. We tasted the wine that we have in front of us. We've been talking about it as we've been going through the event. It's evolved while we've been talking. Right now on Wine Access, they're selling the last 4 packages where, again, really getting into it, they take they have 3 different bottlings of clusterings. So 0% whole clusterings, 50%, 100%. Super fun way to, again, just kind of be analytical about it. Can you taste the differences, right? And I think a lot of the times when
so you can buy this on Wine Access
right now, yeah,
and do your own little tasting test party.
Yeah. So I was looking for the pictures and I found this, and then I found out about it right before while I was making the slides, 10 minutes before.
So we already bought it then.
Basically, yeah. So when we talk about whole clusterings and we talk about these types of tasting side by side.
What is whole cluster first?
Whole cluster is so before when we saw the barrels we saw the grapes hanging on the vines. When you cut the cluster, you crush from the whole cluster, which allows some of the more like the actual twig parts,
tannins from the sticks,
to come into the wine influence. So when we have a 0% whole cluster, that means that they were destemmed. The wines are separated from the stem, and then we have the pressing that happens afterwards. Otherwise, the pressing has the stems in them, which imparts tannin. And then there's a lot of phenolics. It's not like it's a bad thing. The question
it's kind of like the original style.
It's the original. And the question oftentimes is it worth the labor cost to take away the stems? So is it worth the cost to have whole cluster, whole cluster versus not?
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting when
Could be a matter of taste.
Yeah. When we do this wine tasting, sometimes our first instinct is to say, which is best? Which is better? Which do I like the most, right? But here we have the same grape from the same plot, from the same producer, made in the exact same way. The only difference is whole cluster, right? How much of it is whole cluster? And it almost challenges you to find the similarities through the differences. And that, I think, is an experience worth having,
Cool.
So we'll have that soon. Yep. We did put on here, the primary tasting notes. I think we've mentioned it before, but when we talk about Willamette Valley versus California and Burgundian, my assessment is that we get a lot more pepper notes. We get a lot more of these 5 spice, and it's a real visceral mouth experience.
This one's not as spicy as some of them, but some of them are very spicy.
Yes. And then when we talk about California wines, they have a lot more sunlight, right? So in California, big fruit forwardness, very soft tannins.
Ripe fruit.
Very ripe fruit. California still has high diurnals, right? That hot during the day, cold at night. So we still have acid development, but I think that the tannins were a little bit lighter. When we went here to Willamette, I was surprised that Pinot Noir had tannins and then this pepperiness to it.
One of the things it does have in common with Burgundy is some of these forest, flora, and mushroom notes, which can be very desirable in a Pinot Noir. I think this one has some of that. Not as much. I've had some that has more, but that can be a really fun note that you will also find in Burgundy.
And that's an interesting thing, right? Do you try to make something that tastes like Burgundy wine, or do you try to make something that tastes like the place it comes from and tries to distinguish itself, right?
I think Willamette Valley Pinot Noir has a distinct flavor, and I like it. It's good. I think it's very food friendly, great with dinner. We've had it with all kinds of different foods, everything from seafood to meat and vegetables, and I think it's really, really lovely. One of our favorite meals of all time is the Costco salmon with the crab cake inside and a bottle of Furioso Pinot Noir.
Yes,
that was a memorable
That
meal.
was very memorable. We did that during COVID, and that was a fantastic event.
We were like, why did we not buy a case of this wine?
We should have. And we actually, when we tasted the Furioso Pinot Noir, we loved it so much. We raved about it. We wrote down about it, and we're like, this is great. And then we went home, and about, I think, a year later, Wine Spectator magazine came out and said that it was their top 10 wine of the year. And it was
well, it was
something of that nature. And I was
it was
we should have known.
Awarded.
Yeah. So I think we have a good taste palate.
And that was one of the wineries that we got suggested to go to from someone else. So when you're on a wine trip like this, it's nice to leave some time open sometimes to go visit places that might be able to see you without appointment. Now, Willamette Valley, it's not like Burgundy in the sense that every single place you go, you have to have an appointment, but some of the locations are going to require an appointment, especially the highest tier. So you're going to want to make those appointments before you arrive, but there's leave some room for some exploration too, because if you ask the professionals there, where else should I go? They'll give you some great tips. And that's how we found Furioso, which we really liked.
Yeah. No, really great insight about how our tour through Willamette Valley, really unfolded. And we also split tastings. We also communicated with each of our wine professionals that was behind the bar. They weren't just there pouring wine. They loved wine. That's why they were there. And we explained to them why we were there, not who we are. We're not of note, but we explained our purpose for being there. And sometimes we'd say we have 10 minutes until we have to be somewhere, and they would align a tasting for us so we got the best expression of their vineyard in the time that was fitting. And it was awesome. It was really great. They took care of us out there.
Yeah, everyone was great.
Can't if you're looking for an enotourism spot, I really think Willamette Valley is the best to go to. Also because the value, right? When we go to other places, they can have great wine, they can have beautiful views, it can be done very well, but when we think about Pinot Noir, its comparison is Burgundy.
Which is very, 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 very expensive if you can even get the bottles.
And you can't really even do tastings while you're out there. So this is probably the best way
to... Well, you can taste, you can't buy.
That's right.
In Burgundy. Here you can taste and buy, which is nice. A more satisfying ending.
So let's real quick. I'm going to just take that picture away real quick. And then... So as Beth said, we have, when you're out there, you can stay on site. And when you stay on site, this can be the view out your bedroom window. They have fruit available for you at the farmer's market that you can pick up, and then you can buy a bottle of wine. And then we put that back. We're just going to change our settings real quick so that way, yep. Really kind of cool. You show up at hold on, we'll go back to our other microphone.
Yeah, when we showed up, there was a concert going on at the house that we were staying at. It was wonderful.
So we got to hop in. They had
And a
a
meal.
jazz guitar. They had a meal. We didn't know that, and as we said,
Well, you didn't know that.
I didn't
I
know
knew
that.
I had tickets. But
It was a wonderful experience and a great way to conclude our wonderful wine tour. And so we hope that you appreciated coming with us on our tour, and that you enjoyed going through the bottle with us today. And then this is a picture of us at Furioso, our favorite wine, one of our favorite wineries.
it was a very cool.
It was very cool.
Architecturally as well. The tasting room was a really cool building, so it was neat.
So thank you so much for joining us today. This concludes our 40-ish.
40th?
Yeah,
40-ish?
I'm pretty sure it's our 40th.
Close.
It's
We'll
close
call it.
enough.
We'll
We're
call it
calling it our 40th wine experience, and we'll see you guys in a little bit. All right, stop.